Welcome back to Inspector Toolbelt Talk. Today we have on the show Dylan Morgan from Property Doc. Hey Dylan, how are you?
I'm doing well, Ian. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, looking forward to having you on the show. You've actually been a website client of ours for years now, and we've had some great conversations. I've always found your questions insightful and concise, and then at the same time, I've had to really think about them. And the great conversations that we've had has led me to asking you to be on the show because I think you have some insightful information. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I know some of my questions you're probably like, here we go again. I never run out of questions.
No, I love it because sometimes people ask a question, hey, how do I get a real estate agent to like me? It's like, oh, okay. But you ask questions like, what do you think the ROI on direct-to-consumer in this vertical is going to be? And I'll be like, oh, okay. Let me sit down here for a minute and put my coffee down. Yeah. So a couple of reasons I wanted to have you on, but first, let's get to know you, Dylan. So Property Doc. Tell us about you. Tell us about your company, your background, social security numbers, credit card numbers, things like that.
Yeah, well, I started the company about 3 years ago now, just about to the day. Came out of a corporate white-collar job that I I hated. I didn't like it. And thought it was a good opportunity to start a business. I didn't think I had any better opportunity than then. I had a little nest egg. I didn't have any, family to worry about or anything like that, and decided to go for it. I chose home inspections. I was already working in a real estate setting. The most recent job was more in commercial, but had been working in real estate since I got out of college, and was considering becoming a real estate agent or an appraiser or home inspector, which is what I settled on. I think my main concerns with the real estate agent and appraisers was just technology. I was looking for something to invest in over the long term, and I do think that those professions could be under serious threat from technological advances, internet listing sources, things like that. So home inspections, though, I can't figure out how you could possibly automate this job.
Yeah, we can't be outsourced. We can't be put into a computer program, and we're here to stay.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, threat from foreign labor is non-existent. Home inspectors pretty much have to be local, real people. Robot can't do it. Someone in Indonesia can't do it. And technology can't automate it away. So I thought it was a service product that would be around for a very long time.
Yeah. Plus, you picked a better career because hour per hour, the average home inspector makes more than anybody else in the transaction. You see an agent spend, weeks and months and however many hours working with a client, and they make a commission of $3, $4, $5,000, in the average market. Home inspector, we can make $500 to $2,000, and we're gone by lunchtime. So
exactly, yeah.
Same thing with appraisers.
If you're pricing right, and with agents too, it's commission based. So I'm sure they figure out how to find good leads just like we do. But theoretically, they can have someone run them all over town, look at 99 houses, and spend hundreds of dollars in gas, wear and tear on their car, their time, and not sell a house.
Yep.
So
same thing with real estate.
Law of averages that work out, but it's nice in this business. Once you've showed up, when I show up to a home inspection, I'm usually already paid.
Yep.
So
that's the way to do it, and that's the beautiful part about our industry. But our podcast today is called "Real Numbers to Run Your Business By," and you had presented some kind of interesting topics to talk about. We're going to talk about numbers to when it comes to investing and diversifying, but also our pricing and market psychology and a whole bunch of things. But I found out just today that you have an MBA. So you have an MBA in real estate and business?
It's a business administration degree, and it does have a concentration in real estate. So all it means is that out of the 15 classes, 3 of my elective courses were all real estate focused. So I took a real estate development class, I took a real estate law class, The third one, I think, may have just been an investment analysis class. So, there's a couple things that I picked up from there that I'd say are maybe useful, but overall, more just the MBA and the my bachelor's degree, which was entrepreneurial focused. The classes that I took in those programs and the case studies that we had have been surprisingly relevant to me. They're things that I've thought about quite a bit trying to build this business. I would say I've been a little critical about college degrees as someone that has one, but I would say I've used both of them more in the past 3 years than I ever did in my job before.
Yeah, and I know you kind of downplay it a little bit, and that's great, the humility of it. But in reality, I mean, we're in a real estate.
Cost.
Yeah, well, the cost, yeah.
The cost is enormous.
Yeah, oh yeah, I can't imagine that. I didn't get past the 9th grade, so I don't have that cost.
I don't want to go too far down this tangent, but the opportunity cost and the financial cost of a college degree is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, if you let's say so I chipped away at my MBA over several years part-time, but if you take a traditional student that spends 5 years getting a bachelor's degree and master's degree in business, it's a 6-figure degree now. You're probably spending $100,000 or more, and you have opportunity cost of not working a real job at 40 hours a week for 5 years. I mean, you're several $100,000 behind before you even start. So it's just something to keep in mind. If you're going to go down that road, just make sure there's a payoff.
Yeah, and I think most of our listeners here are probably past that part of their life, and they're probably working into a home inspection career. But we are going to tap on your brain for that, because your degree does have value to us. It is a real estate industry that we're in, and it's a real estate degree. And one thing I like about you is some quick math that you ran in your head. You are a math guy, math wonk, how do you put it? But you love math, right?
Yeah, I like finance. I think that's where it is. I like pretty numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, I remember because we did a podcast and we used a calculation to calculate the actual cost of owning a home. And we were talking afterwards, and you just said, "Oh yeah, I know that," and you did the equation in your head real quick, and I'm like, "Oh wow, that's cool. that's a useful skill."
Yeah. Some people sometimes I get called a human calculator by my family, and I like to run numbers, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have you on today, because both your real estate industry experience and your math skills apply very much to what we're talking about. Because we as home inspectors sometimes are very good at inspecting homes and not so great at business and finances. For me, I was really great at business. I feel like I was really great at business, and I feel like I was really great at inspecting a house. But I've said it before on this podcast, when it came to money, I'm really good at making it, and then I have it, and I go, all right. And I preferably poke it with a stick and say, do something.
Good thought to have.
Yeah, I guess. But why do you think it's important for us as home inspectors and business owners to understand our business numbers as a lead into our subject today?
Wow, I can answer that in a lot of different ways. Well, you need to know how you want to use your money first, because we've got layers that you don't have as an employee. Like for an employee, just starting with simply investing for the future, if you're on a salary, just basically throw as much money as you can afford into a tax advantaged account, 401k or Roth, and that's about the extent of it, unless you want to invest in things outside of those platforms. But as a business owner, you have to decide first, how much money am I going to invest right back into my own business before I pay myself anything? Mm-hmm. And then the other important part about knowing numbers is just you need to know how much money are you actually making on a home inspection. And so first you have to take, let's say you charge $450 for a home inspection. What are your variable costs for selling that inspection? And those are going to be your cost associated to that individual job. So your transportation costs, any software costs that you pay on a per inspection basis, call center costs if you're using that. And then you're also going to have your fixed costs every month, which would be things like insurance, things that just don't change based on how much work you do. So you need to know all those numbers. So first you know how to set your price, so you're actually making money. And then also that helps you determine other things later, like, what do you want your cost of customer acquisition to be? How much money are you willing to spend to build a relationship with a real estate agent? Once you know those numbers, you know what those people are worth to you monetarily.
Yeah. So I like how you said that, monetarily anyways, how much a person is worth to you. So acquisition cost. So if you don't mind me asking, that'd be great to know all those numbers, but how does somebody find that out? So let's maybe take that in pieces. How would somebody determine the acquisition cost of, let's say, a real estate agent?
You're going to figure that out because it's different for every company. It's your acquisition cost. How much is it costing you? And so your goal, of course, is to minimize that number. But there's trade-offs. So, for example, if you wanted to start figuring out what it might cost you to find real estate agents to work with, first you should think about how much the agents are worth. So I'm going to use an example of something I've done in the past. A phone call marketing program. So I got a seasoned sales veteran to cold call real estate agents and try to set up a coffee or lunch appointment with me where I could go in and try to close them on working with me. So I knew that guy, and some people might think I overpaid for him, but I wanted a really good sales guy, and I believe I was paying him $45 an hour to do that. And I gave him a list of not every person with a real estate license, but a list of agents that were likely to reliably produce a significant number of home inspections every year. So I didn't really want to pay the guy $45 an hour to call agents that did one deal last year. But he was calling top producers that were doing 12 or more deals a year, and or they've been established for several years, so they're not likely to, move on to something else. And so you start to put these pieces together. You got to start out with guesses. I think he should be able to close this many number of agents, and then once you actually start doing it, you start to get the real numbers, and so you have to figure out where you need to make adjustments. Or in some cases, you might determine that the campaign's too expensive. You can't improve the numbers, and you just have to cut it. I did that with my mailer marketing for new construction. I actually just I was sending out warranty mailers. I've been doing that for like a year, but I couldn't find any opportunities to improve the campaign any further than it was, and I was producing, I think, a 2 or 3 for 1 return. I just didn't feel like that was worth doing anymore, so I cut it.
Interesting. Okay. So you seem to be doing a lot more marketing than the average home inspector probably does. We all like to think that we're marketing hard, but hiring somebody to make those kind of phone calls, that's an awesome idea, first of all, I think. I think most of us would probably try to do it ourselves, and I think most of us as home inspectors have what we would consider low acquisition costs for an agent. What we don't have typically is low acquisition cost for a client. So a real estate agent, I can drive to 10 offices in a day, spend maybe $100 and then gas, and then obviously my time and all that, and I can pick up 5, 6, 7 agents. But my average agent is going to be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a year, and obviously with churn, I'm going to lose some and gain some. So the average lifespan of an agent is going to be 5 or 6 years. All that being said, that's tens of thousands of dollars for one agent. So acquisition cost for an agent is cheap. It might be $100. And it's those of you that are listening and thinking, I don't pay anything. I just drive to an office and the agents refer me. Great, there's still acquisition cost. You had to brand. You had to put your logo on your shirt or your vehicle. You have to have software. You have to have all this stuff to be able to walk into that office and win that agent.
And if you're the cost of your time.
The cost of your time. Yep.
Now, if you're not busy, then I guess you could say it's not costing you much. But Yeah, if you're if you're out doing, the home inspector is doing this themselves, even if they're just driving around town burning gas, that's time that could have been spent doing an inspection.
Yeah, and even if we don't have inspections, it still costs us because, okay, we're either doing that or we're sitting at home or we're getting paid to do a job. So let's say close to minimum wage at $15 an hour. Upstate New York is going to $15 an hour. So you have to, at a very basic, if you went to get a job at a fast food joint, $15 an hour, that's what it's costing you to be out there, even if you don't have any work. So it does have a cost, the cost and time.
Yep.
I would say most companies probably hover right around the $50 to $100 mark for agents. But where it gets expensive is acquiring clients, because clients can be a little bit more expensive to try to acquire sometimes, because you think about things like lead generation, time on the phone with a client. I can win an agent over in one interaction, but clients oftentimes take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes on the phone, talking with them beforehand and afterward. Acquisition of cost of a client can be expensive, especially when it comes to time.
Yeah, and that I'll add, just once you have an established relationship with a real estate agent, a lot of those agents just go on the website and book an inspection. I just get an email and a text. There is no time spent convincing them. They work with me all the time. They know the deal. They just go straight to the website. They do the work themselves. That's my favorite email.
Yeah.
Cha-ching. But customers don't do that as often. Sometimes, but not as often.
Yep. And it's also better to try to keep our existing agents too, I would imagine. So I'm always referencing The Office because I'm a huge nerd. But I remember that one episode with the fire where Ryan burned the cheesy pizza, and Ryan started quizzing Michael. He's like, is it cheaper to keep an existing customer or to acquire a new one? Almost invariably in almost every business model, it's always cheaper to keep an existing agent than it is to go out and get a new one. We lose agents all the time, but I see inspectors sometimes talk about, oh, well, I didn't need them anyways. I'm like, okay, it would have cost you $100 in time to go out and acquire a new agent when it would have cost you $20 to go on and unclog that client's drain of broccoli and make a good name for yourself and keep that agent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
reputation management, that's something that I think is important.
Yeah, and our reputation with our clients and with the agents in particular.
I know you've been that I think, because I was just looking at this the other day, and he sent me 55 inspections over the past, we'll say, year and a half or so. And I know that one of the first inspections I did with him, that client's microwave didn't work after they moved in. I thought it worked. I don't know what wrong. I guess I didn't really, test it properly. Probably just hit the on button, and it looked like it worked, and it didn't. I have a tool for that now, one of those little Internachi things that glows red.
Yeah.
But I didn't at the time, and I did, even though I guess technically you could have said it, the microwave wasn't part of the inspection. I did test the appliances and gave the client the impression that they worked. So I wrote, but he told me about it. He wasn't even really asking me to do anything. He was just like, hey, did you do anything with the microwave? Because when the client moved in, they said it didn't work. And I was like, well, I turned it on, but I guess the magneto wasn't working. And so I sent him a check for $300, which is what it cost them to get a new microwave installed. But I mean, that agent was he was all about me and my company from that point. He was already using me, but who knows, maybe he would have went somewhere else, but it actually ended up being an opportunity, a pretty easy opportunity at the end of the day to reinforce that I stand by my product. So. Yeah.
And that's a good example. Sometimes we're afraid to take care of people because we're worried we're going to be taken advantage of. And that does happen. But I had a similar experience early on in my career. Guy moved in, and there was a support for the main drain line in the basement. So when the people moved out, they took it. Like, who takes that? What are you using it for? It was in the picture in my report. So agent calls me. They're freaking out. There's sewage in their basement. I'm like, sewage in their basement? I ran hundreds of gallons of water because I have this weird OCD thing. I run all the tubs and showers for pretty much the whole inspection. Anyways, I get there, he had his entire first floor bathroom taken apart. Toilet was up, tub fixtures were out. It was a mess. And I just go into the basement and I say, "Why do you have your bathroom taken apart? It was newly remodeled." And he goes, "I thought that's where the problem was." And, he was a good old boy. Like he was kind of rough around the edges. He was chewing on tobacco and spitting in his own basement. I'm like, "Dude, man," I'm like, "stop spitting for 2 seconds and let's fix this." So we popped the pipe back in, resupported it, and I said, "Now I'll let you put your bathroom together." And I spent a half an hour with him. That agent and her office referred me for years. She sent me a thank you note. He left me a great review. And every inspector I knew at the time was just like, "No, don't go back. That's stupid. That's not your fault." I'm like, "I don't care if it's not my fault. It's on my way, and it's 20 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, you have an opportunity to try to take control of that narrative. When you showed up, first off, it just showed most people wouldn't do what you did. Just coming back to the scene of the crime, basically, and helping the guy with it. But rather than that guy just sitting there bad-mouthing you about what you missed, when you come there and you show and you help him fix it, and you also get an opportunity to explain like how that wasn't really your fault anyways in this case, it changes his perception of what happened.
Right.
And so you turn that client around, and of course, like you said, the real estate office continued to use you for years. Sometimes it's just important to like get involved in the situation rather than try to hide from it. And that's what I've done. And unfortunately, I think I've gotten off kind of easy on complaints. But when something does come up, even if it's not a direct complaint, if it even sounds like it could be a complaint, I try to get on top of it to turn that around if possible. So
yeah, and to go back to your point, first of all, you do a good, thorough job. But when I went back to do it, it was because I wanted to do the right thing. But also, to your point, I ran numbers in my mind. Like, how much is it going to cost me if this 20-minute trip, I skip it and it turns into a bad review?
Yeah,
that's incalculable. So then I said, okay, well, this agent refers me 5 or 6 inspections a year. Okay, again, 20 minutes. We at the time we're charging about $200 an hour. So what's that? $40, and it really took me 20 minutes. That agent started to refer all of her inspections, and then I didn't have the cost of the bad review.
Yeah.
So. To your point, it's a matter of, how did you put it? How much is that person monetarily worth to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you got to look at that for gain and loss.
Yeah.
And a lot of you've got to think about like you just said, it's not, the cost wasn't the time that you spent helping him. The cost could have been him costing you more business. It's the opportunity cost that matters more. Even in my example with the $300 check for the microwave, I didn't want to just send someone $300. But if we make an assumption that maybe the reason the agent has continued to use me ever since then, well, the agent's brought me, we're just going to throw out a ballpark, $15,000 worth of business. Take the $300 on the microwave and divide that by 15,000. It's a small percentage.
Well, and then on top of that, we had Jay Wynn on the podcast one time, and he said every inspection I missed is future money lost. Every inspection is hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially lost because that agent brought you 55 inspections. So very likely I would guess that 40 or 50 of those had another agent on it that you might not have known or met otherwise. And now you get to demonstrate your great report, your great inspection. So all of those are cumulative in the numbers that you need to think about. How much am I going to lose over time? If I lose one inspection, I could lose hundreds of inspections.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned, I caught something a few minutes ago, $200 an hour. Years ago is what y'all were charged for home inspections or home inspection services.
Yep.
Yeah. That's incredible. So I don't think a lot of guys are charging anywhere near that.
Well, so that's also a problem with our industry. I've seen the numbers go up slightly with inflation, but we charge so little compared to what we did years ago. $200 was our base rate. I wouldn't get out of bed and go look at anything if it was under $200. So that's anything, you know. So a home inspection, I would always figure I want at least $200 an hour. Because so going back to your cost point, it cost us $125 to get out of bed and show up to the inspection. People are like, oh, those are high numbers, but take into account all of those costs. Acquisition cost of agents, gas, time, insurance, branding, everything. Or that year that you were in the negative, you need to earn all of that back, and that's all cost rolled into it. So it's probably a little bit higher now, but $125 per inspection. So that means the first almost 45 minutes, I'm just burning off overhead. Mm-hmm. So I never wanted to work for less than that. Yeah. But that's actually probably a good segue. You're a numbers guy. What do you have to say about inspection fees in general?
I've got some ideas that sometimes don't align with each other, but you got a couple things. One, there's in a commodity market, the market price pretty much dictates the sale. But a commodity is like corn or soybean, and I don't think that farmers can really just decide they're going to charge 10% more in the market rate and sell their corn, unless there's something different about it. Maybe it's organic, pesticide-free, something like that. But that's a good example. Now, you have home inspections. This is a professional service. We're not a commodity, although there does seem to be some pressure towards that model. I don't think it'll ever stick. It's too nuanced. And the expectations of the home inspector, I think, they're too high. I don't think we're ever going to get a standardized product in home inspections. There's always going to be a big variance. I don't want to say always, but right now there's a big variance in the competency of the home inspector, the thoroughness of the home inspector, the personality of the home inspector, and all those things influence the price. And so you have the opportunity to compete in a lot of different ways. I think a lot of home inspectors think that the main way to compete is on pricing, but it's really not. There's a range that you'll probably need to be within. I mean, I don't think that a brand new home inspector is going to come on the scene and charge $1,000 for a home inspection just because they feel like it and people are going to pay it. But when I came in 3 years ago, I decided I wanted to be on the higher end. This was something I thought about before I ever even sold my first home inspection, was what is my position going to be in this market? And there's pretty much in any business, there's already going to be the guys that have already positioned themselves at the bottom. Their main game is volume and low price, and that's what's going to sell their service. I'm not going to try to compete with a Walmart business model. I don't think that I can offer the level of service or quality that I want to offer at those price points. And it's just not very interesting or fun to me either. I like building a brand that's valuable. And so I decided to go the other direction. I'm not trying to be on the extreme high end because I don't want to kill my own demand to where I can't scale the company, because I don't always want to be a solo home inspector. But I am trying to be in the that higher quadrant. You know, the upper 25% of prices. And with that, I believe that I deliver a better product. I do a ton of, here's another cost for each inspection that's hard to quantify. I've done 500 something hours of continuing education.
Oh, wow.
So like, does that, how does that factor into your fees? The time you spend unpaid just learning? It may be more than that. I don't know. I haven't looked in a minute, but I do a tremendous amount of continuing education to try to always know as much as I possibly can. I don't cut corners in the inspection. If I have to be there for 3 hours, even though I was only planning to be there for 2 hours, so be it. I stay until the job's done. I answer the questions the client has. I don't rush them. I don't stack my inspections so close together that I have to take off to the next one before it's time. All this is about trying to make sure that the customer experience is always perfect or as close to perfect as I can get it. I just don't think you're going to have a viable business model trying to do all that, trying to compete with what I'm offering for $300. And when tools and equipment, even, I'm using a thermal camera on every inspection. It's not an upcharge. I'm not scared of the tool. Anything that I think is in my client's best interest, they get it. And part of the reason I can do that is because I charge accordingly. And I actually just started putting out some feelers to figure out what my competitors are charging this week. And I'm planning on adjusting my prices upwards in April.
Nice.
And I'll probably go up 10% or so.
Nice. And that's what I like to hear. And that's why we're talking about this subject. Real numbers to run your business by. You didn't just do a quick internet search and say, okay, $350 sounds good for my home inspections. You're looking at acquisition cost of agents and clients. You're looking at what your overhead is, what others in the market are charging, so what you can sustain, and what bracket you want to be in for what you're charging.
Yeah, well,
that's beautiful.
You got to be careful with the internet sources because a lot of that information is just garbage.
Yeah.
If you go to Google and type in average home inspection fee, it does not align with reality. If it does, I don't know who these people are because it'll say that the average home inspection price is like $300 something. Mm-hmm. Who is charging that much? Because if you ask someone else, right? Don't ask Google, because Google will pull up they'll populate a result from Home Advisor. At the very least, you have to consider selection bias in these samples. So where does Home Advisor get their average inspection fee? Well, I don't know for certain, but they're probably getting it from the home inspectors that use Home Advisor. Mm-hmm. Well, then, who is Home Advisor trying to cater to? Well, if you Google search home inspection, Richmond, Virginia, for example, Home Advisor would probably be one of the top paid ads. And it used to say, probably still does, don't overpay, compare the pros. Okay, so Home Advisor wants a customer that's already really price focused. They're already going to compare. It's going to be a dogfight. They're going to, make all these home inspection companies fight for their business on price. That's what Home Advisor is already signaling from their Google ad. So a lot of the home inspectors that are on Home Advisor are already in a fierce competition with each other based on pricing. They might not even get their call answered if they're not within a certain range. So that site creates price pressure where you're going to have lower priced people already. Is that where they're getting their data from? Because if you look at all the companies that maybe don't use Home Advisor for that reason, I'm one of them, they don't charge fees that low. My fees start at $450, which, this is going to change. This is going to depend on people's areas, so that number is not really relevant to someone that might be in the Midwest. But in this Richmond area, my lowest fee just to come to your house, I don't care how small it is $450. Mm-hmm. And I actually have already gotten a pricing list from one of my competitors, and he charges into lower brackets than I do for size. But just based on his fees, I'm wanting to raise mine because I'm supposed to be more expensive than him. He's charging almost as much as I am now. I guess because of inflation. I haven't raised my price since January of last year. But you don't really need to worry so much about trying to be in this low price just to sell the service. Another thing to consider, people will say that in supply and demand that, the more you charge, the less demand you'll have, which I think in a general sense is true. But what that doesn't take into consideration is something like consumer psychology. Mm-hmm. I'm going to use myself for example. I'm kind of odd, so I don't know if I'm the best example of your average consumer. But maybe you don't want to sell to your average consumer. I'm the kind of person where if I see something that's really cheap, price-wise, I'm less likely to buy it because I'm suspicious of it. Mm-hmm. Well, why is it so cheap? There's got to be a catch. And to me, the cost of something isn't necessarily just its price. It's what it's going to do for me. And so, for example, I will never buy a cheap set of tires because I'm scared of them. I'm afraid they're going to blow out and leave me stranded on the side of the road, which is way more expensive to me than the $200 I saved compared to a reputable, high-quality, more expensive tire. Just an easy example. a lot of the stuff I buy is there are areas where I am more cost sensitive because I don't really care that much about what it is. That product to me is not of any great consequence in the long run. So let's say like I don't know, something silly on Amazon. A container. How about a storage container? Maybe I just don't feel like spending a lot of money on that, and I'll buy something cheap. If it breaks, who cares? I'll buy another one. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go for a cheap home inspection, though. I don't want to save $50 on my home inspection and risk having someone come in that doesn't care, that rushes it, or is incompetent and misses a $30,000 foundation issue. And so those are the consumers you want. You want the people that understand this game at least a little bit better, or at least they have a little more common sense than to think that their best value is the lowest price.
I couldn't have said it any better. You hit the nail right on the head. And it's funny you mentioned the tire thing. I started to laugh a little bit because I actually had a tire blow just a week or two ago. Ran over a drill bit in the road. I don't know why.
Really?
Yeah, went in sideways. Long story, but anyways, there was a Walmart down the road. And my tires were a bit low. I needed 4 tires anyways, but now I needed at least 2. So me and a buddy, plugged the tire, filled it up. I drove it home instead of going to Walmart and waited overnight and then brought it to my mechanic to get some nice hand-cooked tires because they were better. Yeah. So he didn't worry that I could get it cheaper at Walmart. That was just where I was going. I went for value. So it's funny you mentioned the tire thing. But it is a different type of person that you're going to market to. If you're marketing with price, now I'll caveat this. I shop at Walmart. They have some good subs there, by the way. But, you go to Walmart and you see a lady arguing with the cashier because the peanut butter is 12 cents more expensive than she expected, and you won't take her expired coupon.
Yeah.
It's a different mentality than the person who goes and shops at the Whole Foods, which you're going to pay $30 for this weird Amazonian peanut butter.
Yeah.
So not saying one is better than the other. We're all human beings, and everybody has different situations. But when it comes to our business, do we want someone who's going to fight with us because I could get that radon test $25 cheaper from your competitor? Then they call us 3 times, and every little nickel and dime that we charge, that's what we're going to be working with. Whereas you go to a nice restaurant, sometimes they don't even put the prices on the menu. It's that old expression: if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Makes me nervous, but
I personally hate that.
I do too. But
I want to know what it costs.
But it's a different type of person that we're going to be marketing to.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I would have people ask my price, still do to this day, after the inspection's over. How much was it? They were told on the phone, but it didn't even register. They're like, I don't care. Are you the best? Do you do the best job?
Here's a little plug for having good, investing in good software and systems. More than half of the time, by the time I show up to an inspection, I have a signed agreement and it's paid. Mm-hmm. We don't even have to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things. I pay a transaction fee. Yeah, so what? I lose, 2.75%. But I don't spend any time having to deposit checks, ask for money, forget to ask for money, and then have to figure it out later. It's just, I love automation, just things that it's just done for me. All I have to do is show up, do my job.
Yeah, so like even our app, Inspector Toolbelt. So one guy was just like, that's $69 a month. I'm like, yeah, but you just paid someone to send out your inspection agreements, send out reminder emails and text messages, and get paid. And all you do now is enter some information and inspect. So that automation part is extremely important because there's a cost there to doing it ourselves. I was talking to a guy today. He goes, yeah, it's a lot of work. I have to go in and manually enter the information, manually send the contracts, talk with the clients extra. And I'm just like, that sounds like a lot of work, man. Just get some automation.
Just, knowing thyself, I'd be horrible at that. I know my strengths and weaknesses. I am a bit forgetful. I like just taking the human error out of things. Mm-hmm. My software will never forget to send an email to a client asking them for a signed agreement of payment. All those things are done every time without fail, I don't have to worry about forgetting or there being a typo or sending it to the wrong person. So I much prefer to systemize as much as I possibly can.
Yeah. And those are going back to the theme here, real numbers. I think it's important that we mention that a lot of times we have numbers in our head versus real numbers. I've often talked to guys that say, it doesn't cost me anything to run my business. I hear guys say that a lot. It doesn't cost me anything. What, a little bit of gas? Like, it costs you more than you might think. So the cost of software, the cost of doing business, insurance, our time, all of those are real solid numbers. And that's why I've always liked you. You've never come to me and said, hey, and here's this magical thing I'm thinking of. What's your opinion? You say, hey, I've crunched the numbers, and here's what I can figure out based on market data. That's why I say, okay, here's a Dylan question. Let me put my mug down here, and let's wrap my brain around this. That's a beautiful thing. Real numbers.
Yeah.
So
the numbers will tell you a lot. I don't think it's everything necessarily, but they're a very important part of the puzzle that you need to know. And it'll help you make decisions too about where you want to go next. What's the money behind it? Do you want to do radon? Is that popular in your area? Mm-hmm. If it is, you want to know what the general market rate is, what you think you could charge. Is that worth it to you to invest in the equipment, to deal with the calibrations, to make a second trip to these houses? You got to know the numbers behind all this stuff. And you don't just want to be flying by the seat of your pants because you might not be making as much money as you think you are. And so, I mentioned investing back in your company. So I chose to do that last year with Radon. Towards the end of the year, in December, I went ahead and bought a bunch of monitors. I wanted to drop my taxable income for the year, and that was a easy way to do that. On top of, I didn't buy them just for a tax write-off. I've heard of that before. In fact, you had a tax on your podcast recently that talked about that. That's one of my pet peeves. I hate it when people do that. Don't go buy a brand new car just so you make less money. Yeah. Unless you need a brand new car, or wanted one anyways. Just don't do it to save on taxes. But radon monitors, I bought the radon monitors because there was a business need for them. I decided that it was worth it to expand into that. And so I went ahead and bought them in December to go ahead and I think I dropped my income like $6,000. So yeah, I'll take the tax write-off if I can get it. But I decided to get into radon. Actually, it was about more than just the numbers. So I did determine that I was going to set a price that it was worth it to me to offer it, but I was not actually that motivated by the price. Mm-hmm. I was actually doing it to try to create more of a one-stop shop for the clients and the agents, knowing that there was some demand for that. I thought it would strengthen my model or my brand for them to be able to get the home inspection and the radon with me and not have to go to two different places for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of why the numbers aren't always everything. So we've done radon for almost 20 years, and we view it as a loss leader. You say you charge $200 for a radon test. I mean, that's a giant pain in the butt. Setting it up takes 10, 15 minutes. Then we're driving back. So let's say it's a half-hour drive. Then, we're dismantling it, dealing with the seller, sending the report. It's a full hour or two of just messing around. And, in New York State, you have to be a lab to use the radon monitors and all this other junk. It's a big pain in the butt. We really don't make much off of them once you do the calculations, but it's a loss leader. We do it because if we didn't do it, people wouldn't hire us. They'd just go to the next inspector that does do it. So it gets us in the door.
Yeah. The numbers I ended up setting on that. So I would love to raise this rate, and I probably will at some point, but like my target hourly rate, I suppose, is about $125 an hour, which I know you said 200, but in my market, my rate, I think, is already in line or higher than some of my competitors. I'll be honest, I think that there's still room for me to save time, which is another way to increase your hourly rate. You either charge more or get more efficient. I'm very efficient in a lot of ways. I do think that I could still get more efficient on site. Some of the older houses with more issues really bogged me down, and so I think I could actually make more money, or more money per hour by continuing to get more efficient with how I report things. But anyways, so
I think you're doing good though. But if you're charging $450 as your base rate, you're well above average. So
yeah,
I mean, if you're 2-3 hours on site, you're about $175 an hour. We're talking on site time, not necessarily overall.
Yeah. Oh well, here's how I figured that. So we might calculate that different. Mine, let's say $450. I've got about 80. Actually, I think that's a little high. I've got about $70. I actually have my spreadsheet right here. What does it say? It's not worth opening up right now. I've got about $70 worth of selling costs, so that would put me at $380. And then take that, and then I also factor in my drive time. So if I spend, let's say I spend, my target is about 2 hours 15 minutes on the inspection for my base house, and then I estimate about 45 minutes worth of driving. So you add about 3 hours. It'd be 380 divided by 3 hours, which I think is just a little over 125 per hour. That's how I come up with that. So maybe, some people may not be assigning drive time in how they calculate that,
but they should be. Yeah,
or the variable costs. See, I take the variable costs out first because I'll never see that money, and I wouldn't have had to pay it if I didn't have the job. So, anyways, I think where I was going with that is, so like with Radon, I set the fee at $200 because that's what I determined I had to charge in order to hit my $125 an hour, and also taking into consideration I got to drive to that house a second time, and that's another mileage charge too of roughly $20. The mileage is an estimate based on a rolling 365 day. I take like the number of miles I drive on average for each house over the past year, and I'll check that periodically. It actually went down recently. I guess I'm not driving as far now, so about $20.45 or something is my mileage. So I reimburse myself as an employee for mileage for my vehicle expense. So that works well for me. Mileage rate's 62.5 cents per mile right now too.
So if this is not an illustration for you listening in of why knowing real numbers is important, Dylan's got everything down to the minute in his calculations.
As much as I can. Some things are still hard to nail down, but you just use predictions and reasonable guesses where necessary, and you'll get close enough.
Yeah.
The more data you have, the more precise you can get. So
exactly. But I wish more of us did things like that, because I see a lot more success for you in the future. I think you're going to be one of those guys that are going to bust out of this relatively rough market that we're going through and just own a lot of market share, more than you already do. But I really appreciate you being on and sharing this information with us. It's a great reminder of knowing some of the details of our business and then using those to basically make our business function better and not wonder what happened later on. So thank you so much for being on, Dylan. We appreciate it a ton.
Sure thing.